Hello everybody, welcome to the Wonky Angle, where I talk about electronic music, both new and old. And today, I'm talking about the new album from Deadmau5, 2016 album. Right, Deadmau5, Joel Zimmerman. You know who he is already. At the beginning of this year, I reviewed the guy's entire discography, so of course I've already been getting several requests to talk about this upcoming new album. If you want more background, you can check the description for the link to my playlist of all the reviews I've done for him, but in the meantime, I'll quickly go down his discography so far. Pretty stylistically different from his usual and fairly disjointed, but it's a pretty solid debut. Boring and overlooked for a reason. Solid stuff, one of my favorites from the guy. Well, it's got Strobe on it. And 16th Hour. Still pop it on every now and then, but not his best. Fairly disjointed again, but yeah, pretty solid. This is easily my favorite from the guy. He experimented with a lot of different styles, and there's even twice as much of it than usual. Which brings us here. Now, leading up to the guy's previous album, I was following the guy's SoundCloud and listening to all sorts of demos that he was working on, and to be honest, I seriously regret doing that. While One Is Less Than Two, as I said, is far and away my favorite album from the guy, and yet there are several choice moments on the album where I can't get myself into what I'm hearing because I heard a demo or unreleased track from him that was much better than the final version, most notably Infraturbo Pit Car Racer. I feel like had I just gone into that album with fresh eyes and not known about any of the stuff he did previously, that album could have made it onto my favorite albums of all time list. But as is, I can't help but nitpick on those moments instead of seeing them how they are. So, a while after that album got released, I decided, you know what? I'm going to stop following Deadmau5's SoundCloud demos and all that kind of stuff. I'm going to stay away as much as I can, so that way going into the next album, I can look at it with fresh eyes and judge it purely for what it is. And since Deadmau5 deleted his SoundCloud page, that became much easier. Granted, going into this album, I had already kinda heard 3 songs. Not enough to actually remember them and get them to stick in my mind. I'd heard Bliss, as I believe that was a demo he posted like right after While One Is Less Than Two. I'd heard parts of Imaginary Friends while scrolling through a live set someone posted on YouTube. And I'd heard Snowcone, as he released it as a single, and at the time I didn't realize it was going to be on his new album. But that was it. And even so, I admittedly was not looking forward to this album that much. First of all, there was no chance this album was going to be on While One Is Less Than Two's level. I mean, first of all, there's only one disc. And on top of that, Deadmau5 was saying on Twitter he wasn't happy with it because he felt like he just threw it together and rushed it to help pay his bills. Yeah, not a good sign if you ask me. I figured best case scenarios that this album would basically be a repeat of album title Goes Here, a disjointed mishmash of songs with no continuous mix that tie everything together. Though I do consider that album to be one of his better ones, there was absolutely no way this could be my favorite Deadmau5 album. So I went into this album with high hopes but low expectations. While I knew this album would not be great, I at least hoped that I'd like all the individual songs, so how did it turn out? Well, I don't know. I mean, I did guess correctly in that it is basically another album title Goes Here, but not entirely. I think this album got a little more experimental than that one did. Some parts remind me of While One Is Less Than Two, some parts remind me of his early work. It's just kind of a mishmash of a bunch of his previous albums, I think. Now, I suppose that at least makes for an interesting listen, but I'll be honest, this didn't exactly blow me away either. It's certainly not bad, but I don't think any of the tracks on here would be making an appearance on that top 10 list I made. Well, there'd probably be 1 or 2 in the honorable mentions, but whatever. I guess I'll go down track by track. We start with For Where, which is basically like a random album title style track, or maybe kinda like There Might Be Coffee or something along those lines. Very melodic sort of track. Definitely a highlight. But then it's followed up by 2448, which is one of my least favorite cuts on the album. Like, it's got a good build-up that's rather intense, almost a little along the Ghost and Stuff lines, but it's all wasted on this drop that's really atonal and boring. And, like, I don't mind atonal drops out of Deadmau5 that don't match the rest of the song, but this drop is just painfully meh. It's weak, it's unsatisfying. Just kills the song's momentum for me. But at least after that we go on to Cat Thruster, which is kinda like See Ya from While One Is Less Than Two, but instrumental. And actually, I think this track is even better than that one. For the record, ever since Ju kinda sorta ripped off Sia on his last album, Sia's actually been growing on me a lot, but Cat Thruster has the added benefit of not being a replacement for my favorite Deadmau5 song of all time, and I think is just a more fun and interesting track overall. I like all the little harp sections in some parts, and it just really gives the song a nice touch. And Deus Ex Machina is kinda like this album's equivalent to Take Care of the Proper Paperwork. Like, it doesn't have that cool ambient intro, but its cold and mechanical tone is surprisingly engaging. It's like Deadmau5's take on, like, Momentum-era Monolake, or even a tiny hint of Oudiker's Xi. And then there's Glish, which is weird, off-kilter, random, interesting. But it's only 2 minutes, so it doesn't stick around nearly long enough to become a highlight in its own right. Imaginary Friends didn't blow me away when I first heard it, but hearing the entire thing now, it's also a lot better than I remembered. It does have a kind of dark and almost atonal drop, but unlike 2448, it's much more satisfying. It's much closer to tracks like Avaritia, and hell, I think I like this track even more than that one. The build-up is more spacious, and the ending with all those creepy pianos is really something else, almost kind of like those prepared piano pieces from Aphex Twin's Drux. Really nice touch there. Then there's the big single off of here, Let Go featuring Grabbits. I guess this is supposed to be kind of like the Ghosts and Stuff or Whelk of this album, and while it's good, it's just really not on the same level as those two. It's not as catchy as either track, and its mood is pretty ambiguous too, pretty dark sounding for a song about how I'll never let go of you. I want to like this one so much more than I actually do. Like, there's even an 11-minute extended mix on this album as well, and on one hand, yeah, the extended mix is definitely better. It's got a better build-up, feels more fleshed out, but I still can't help but think of how the Whelk's extended mix not only has that awesome African-inspired intro, but is just a catchier and more engaging song by itself. Let Go is just kind of a disappointment overall, and I'm mostly just kind of indifferent to. Next we got No Problem, and this one is certainly another interesting one. It's kind of like an upgraded My Pet Coelacanth mixed with elements of Imperturbo Pig Kart Racer. It's all glitchy and abrasive in some parts, and almost IDM-ish in other parts. There's even some cool choirs in some sections. This one didn't leave an impression on me at first, but it's gotten much better with each successive listen. It actually kind of reminds me of Cross-era Justice. Next we get Snowcone, and I'm at least pleased to say this track doesn't stick out to me as retreadable territory. It's like if Sleepless were turned into a darker, more hip-hop kind of track, with all these vintage pianos, booming beat, and occasional synth effects thrown in all over the place. I'm not gonna say it gets a huge emotional reaction out of me, and certainly nothing even close to the actual Sleepless, but it's cool to see him pushing himself into some new territory. But right after that, we got 3-Pound Chicken Wing. And yeah, didn't really like this one. It's basically a weaker and less memorable Superliminal, and as we remember, that was my least favorite track off of album title goes here. I swear, these 6 on the Floor tracks have just been getting worse and worse. FML was great, Right the Second was good, Superliminal was okay, and then this is just kind of a cheap ripoff of the latter. I mean, come on man, you can do better than this. But at the very least, this album ends on easily the best track in the whole bunch, Whelk then, which, like Snowcone, is unlike anything I've ever heard from Deadmau5, but also far more engaging. It's got, like, creepy piano loops, kind of like, well, Creep. It's got all sorts of weird percussion and treated cymbals that make it sound like something out of, like, the Future Sound of London's later Environments albums, or maybe Monolake's Ghosts. The synth effects complement everything really well, and the overall dark and brooding atmosphere is super immersive. It's an excellent and super unique track from the guy, and I wish this album had more stuff like this. But now, to what I think about the album overall. Well, it's definitely not his top-tier work. The lack of a continuous mix doesn't exactly help, but to be fair, I can't see a continuous mix being a major improvement either. given the album's disjointedness. This album is mostly retreading old territory from all across his career, too. I can't imagine this being anyone's favorite Deadmau5 album, to be honest. But I will have to admit, while on first listen, it was painfully meh. It's kinda growing on me, too. The good moments, while not the best he's ever done, are certainly memorable and worth returning to, and the bad moments aren't terrible. I mean, even 3-Pound Chicken Wing does still get my foot tapping. I went into this album with the knowledge that Deadmau5 rushed this album out in order to pay the bills and would most likely be a disjointed mess that doesn't relate any of the songs to one another. And while I can tell he is not bringing his A game on this album, we could have gotten a lot worse. And hey, it's not even been out for a full day as of recording this. It's gotten a little better every time I've heard it. Maybe it'll grow on me even more. Right now, I'm overall feeling a solid 7 out of 10. But of course, this is just my opinion. You can feel free to disagree with it, but I'd like to hear your thoughts, so leave comments in the comment thing down there. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all for today. See you next time.